But we become a power trio on Fridays because we have a tradition on Fridays where we bring in BRYAN MUNSON of Husker Online and On
Back
3.
together again.
Back together again, BRYAN. A lot to break down here. Thanks for joining us once again on a Friday.
You guys are in rare form, man. What they put in the water up there?
It's the water cooler water. Somebody spiked it, I guess.
It's all the good stuff.
I gotcha. There you go.
I can't legally tell you what's in the water.
Cactus water or what?
I can't legally tell you what's in the water. I just know it's good.
Something that was in the water for years here in Nebraska was just, for some reason, a bevy of kickers. Future NFL kickers would make their way through the state or, just actually kind of grow up here. And some of them would leave later, but most of them would stay at Nebraska. Do we see the return as kicker you back with Tristan Alvano's commitment today?
Well, I mean, it definitely continues a tradition, and it is kind of out of the beef state, out of the cornhusker state, or whatever else you want to call it. It is kind of an unusual position to be known for, but Tristan Alvano may be the best, to potentially come through that pipeline of kickers. I mean, with guys that are currently in the pros, guys that didn't even necessarily go to Nebraska, the state is known to produce them. And Alvano had shown, through his career at Westside, let's just be honest, before even the Class A state championship, what he did in the state championship was the cherry on top. Through his career, however, is what really defined him. And I think people got a chance to see, though, leg strength, this clutch, ice in his veins kind of thing. But if you really paid attention to the window dressing, then you got the field goal kicking. But if you really paid attention to what other things he was doing on the football field, like kickoffs, for example, and how he put those into the back of the end zone, you might be seeing, that is the role that potentially he has to play next year at Nebraska, is that is kind of a kickoff specialist, kind of Adi Kunalik-like. And then basically once Timmy Bleekrode, decides to move on from Nebraska, or there's a spot there, or Alvano wins the competition, you then would have potentially this other role kind of develop. And he talked about it to us in his commitment story, and just talked about, hey, look, the room is awesome. Timmy's 22. I just turned 18. He has a wealth of information about school, about life, about how college football was going to work. And he goes, I'm just so interested in going there and playing for Coach RHULE and learning from a guy like Timmy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know back in the day, and maybe it's like 15, 20 years ago, there was kind of an argument about whether you give a scholarship to a kicker. Now this is 2 scholarship kickers that'll be on the roster for Nebraska. Is that pretty much gone across college football? Does everybody have a kicker?
I think that's pretty much what you want. I've heard it said before, and I totally agree with it. The best specialists in college football, when you're a fan, are the ones you don't know their name, because they work like a clock, and you can just put them there. They're a snapper, they're a holder, they're a kicker, whatever. The specialist that you know their name typically is around a bad situation, a bad scenario. Something bad happened, bad snap, blocked, missed a kick, shanked a punt, whatever the case may be. But that's typically where you learn your specialist name. And if you can go through college being almost like, not known who you were or what you look like, you've been successful. But I think that is definitely the trend right now. And I think that what Alvano said, there would be 4 scholarship guys in the specialist room. You've got your long snapper, you've obviously got Bleekrode, you got Buschini, and then you add Alvano. So it's a little heavy, I think everybody would agree. But I think honestly, as everyone saw, Alvano is not a guy you want to see lead the state. I mean, he has got just an absolute cannon for a leg, and the accuracy part obviously is there as well.
Is this something that we're seeing with this coaching staff taking a more progressive role to special teams? I mean, they get a transfer long snapper from Florida, and now they're getting another scholarship kicker on the roster. Are they taking more of a hands-on approach to special teams?
Oh, I think it's certainly a great theory to kind of go into spring and see how things are going to kind of work. Obviously, they're still employing a special teams coordinator as part of the assistant coaching staff. So that's wonderful. I think that Nebraska has seen a difference, particularly, under Bill Bush this last year, where special teams took a step forward. You would like to still see that, when you kick off a practice, typically D1, you've got that 20 minutes as a special teams coordinator. You got like 15 or 20 minutes, and you're not just coaching specialists, taking snaps and kicking the ball. You get the entire team. You are essentially, coaching that 1/3 of the overall game with the entire team at your disposal to kind of figure things out and how things are going to work and plug people in. So that's a real energizing thing about that position is you don't have just the access to the people in your room. You have access to everyone. So I think that's a wonderful thing about that position. And I think, honestly, Nebraska fans, although it hasn't really been as big of a problem, recently in the recent year, prior to this last year, however, special teams were and cost that team multiple wins in the season. And I think that you have a staff now that completely and totally understands that importance coming in and doesn't have to learn that. And I think that that's the difference.
We're speaking with Bryan Munson of On3 Husker Online. And Bryan, something that people kind of got excited about was Matt RHULE and his connections to the state of Texas from his time in Baylor, and how something we've heard is something about the high school coaches down in Texas still really love Matt RHULE, and they admire Matt RHULE, and they have no problem sending their kids to wherever he was going to end up coaching. So Nebraska kind of losing that Texas pipeline with the move to the Big Ten. How active and how successful has or will Nebraska be in the state of Texas?
Well, I mean, it remains to be seen, but there's been more activity, I guess we could probably say, in the last 3 to 4 weeks than probably we had seen the whole last entire, couple, 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, you started to see a difference, I think, with Brian Applewhite being employed by the University of Nebraska. You got an in on Riley Van Poppel. Barrett Ruud decided to go on down and take a look at Dylan Rogers to kind of go along with Hayden Moore for his off the ball linebackers. But there were other running backs, that were coming up, and other players that were popping up that were finally, kind of in the running. But now Nebraska's got like a guy like Prince Will Human Beanlin that's going to be in town this weekend from Manor, Texas, down around Austin. They actually canceled on another guy that was from Austin LBJ High School. I think, and you got Malik Hornsby that's going to be there. Obviously, the transfer from Arkansas, who's from Fort Bend Marshall, down around Houston. You have Bryce Turner that's from Bay City, again down around Houston. So, I think you're starting to see a glimpse. And the thing about recruiting these days, and this is probably the part that RHULE figured out very, very quickly. Teams are usually, buttoned up by mid-July. You get like 85%, 90% of your official visits and your commitments done, I guess, out of that month of June. And then you may carry a couple of spots over, into that September or fall timeframe where you bring some guys in on some game day visits, some guys emerge, some guys are going to think about it, some guys can't visit in June, etc. But that kind of hamstrung this staff. Now they're doing their best they can to kind of wade themselves through, carry over what they wanted to carry over from the 2023 group from the previous staff, and add things to it. And I think that they'll attack things way differently, and I think you will see a stronger presence in Texas, in the Northeast, around Philly, around New Jersey. And I think that they'll still be very, very active in other areas that Nebraska fans are relatively more familiar with, like Georgia and Florida.
And there's a lot of names to ask you about because Husker recruiting's really kind of taken off here. Before the commitment today, the latest commit that I was pretty interested in was Kay Wallen, and maybe I'm saying that wrong, but the community college kid out of California. What can you tell us about him? Is he kind of the prototypical size or look of a 3-3-5 defensive end, or where does he kind of fit in this scheme?
I think he can kind of sit between them. I mean, Kai's got this. He's got a real general ability to be able to play tough against the run and then pin his ears back and go and get the quarterback. And you pick that up from watching this film. And I think that he's a guy right now that you really still see more in a 2-point. You don't want to want to pigeonhole anybody right now because you don't know what this guy is gonna do when he gets on the football field. He's making a jump from JUCO to D1, and obviously he's going to get a chance to work with a much better strength and conditioning situation and nutritionist than what he's had out there in California. But when he gets there, you kind of penciled him into kind of that walk up outside 3-3 guy. You're talking second level. But then also, if you wanted to get, real crazy about stuff and get some more mobile guys there, he can play with his hand in the dirt. And maybe you're going to trunk him out a little bit more than head up 5 and put him out at a 7. And you're going to get more like into like a package on a passing down, which would be more of a professional style as opposed to not really rotating out your defenses all that much. And obviously up-tempo offenses kind of kill that in college. But you try to find ways to kind of get that guy more and more involved. And the good thing about him is at least he has a skill set to not need to take him off the field because he doesn't hurt you against the run, or he's not, it's not that he's not a great pass rusher. He can do all those things. It's just a matter now trying to figure out, are you hand in the dirt, outside as a 5-7, or are you walk up outside linebacker as a kind of a 2-point guy?
You're talking about pass rushers. I got a question about the pass throwers. So we still don't know exactly what Casey Thompson is planning on doing. We do know that he had surgery this offseason on his shoulder, but Nebraska has Malik Hornsby, a transfer quarterback from Arkansas, coming in. If they are to get a commitment from him, does that signal an end to the Casey Thompson era, or are we looking too far forward with that? Is that still something where Casey can come back and they'll compete for the job, or what exactly would a commitment from a transfer portal quarterback mean for Nebraska?
No, it's a great question because, Casey's coming back off of a labrum tear. You don't know if that's a complete or a partial. Partial's just kind of a shave trim job as opposed to a complete that does an anchor and it's 6 months and, you're not doing anything. So there's a real difference in the scope of that surgery, in that injury, number one. But if you look at that room and you consider you have 2 shoulders between Smothers and Thompson, and you had an ankle injury that required surgery in Purdy, you'd really have a lot more guys on the sideline, at least at this moment, versus available to start spring practices. And maybe he can go in the spring because it's a partial, but maybe he's a guy that's completely out. And I think as you look at that room, if I'm Matt RHULE, I'm not feeling necessarily confident, that I don't have enough available bodies to kind of get things going with me in the spring. And obviously I need all those guys that are hurt that can't participate to be doing mental reps and going through film and taking things very, very seriously. I don't think anything can really be taken away if Nebraska gets Hornsby. There's a tremendous relationship with RHULE going back with him back to Baylor before he went to Carolina. And I think there's some other things, some other possibilities that are there because you got a redshirt year with Hornsby that he may be willing to go ahead and say, yeah, I'll sit out a year and kind of pay attention and get things ready. Or he's a sprinter. Maybe he's a guy that wants to take a look at playing another position a la McCaffrey, where you can kind of do some things a little bit differently the first time there in Lincoln, and then you kind of move him back into the quarterback position. I think there's a lot more flexibility with a guy like Hornsby than probably other quarterbacks that are out there. But he clearly has some serious wheels, going to run Division I college wherever he goes. And that relationship with Mark RHULE going in, that's pretty huge for Nebraska.
One final question for Brian Munson, Husker Online and On 3, as he joins us every Friday. Just kind of wrap up the recruiting weekend as a whole. We mentioned a few guys here throughout this conversation, but what is Nebraska looking to bring in, and who would you see as possibly being commitments by the time this weekend wraps up?
Yeah, so if Hornsby's one of the portals, there's 2 other portal transfers that are coming in. Corey Collier and Chief Borders, both from the University of Florida. Collier, a 4-star cornerback out of high school in Miami. He was good friends with Dwight Boodle, Nebraska commitment 2023 class, who Dwight is actually visiting this weekend as well. But Chief Borders is another edge guy, another outside guy, 6'5", 240-ish. He's out of Carrollton, Georgia, which is on the east side of the state near Atlanta. But then you're bringing in like Kyron Jones. And the interesting thing with Kyron is that he's kind of an athlete that sits between somewhere, if you see him as a running back, great. If you see him as a cornerback, great. 10'6", 100. So really, really, really fast. Ramir Stewart coming in from Philadelphia, 3-star defensive back. Things have really moved in a direction that kind of are suggesting that he will end up a Husker. I don't know if you're on commitment watch this week or if he's a signing day deal. You're bringing in some other guys that obviously are commitments. You got like Bryce Turner coming in, Sincere Safila. You got Mason Goldman coming in from Gretna, which is a good way to kind of wrap up things with him. But here's a guy to keep an eye on. And if your listeners don't know who this guy is, they need to go out and look for him up on Huddle. Eric Fields from Ardmore, Oklahoma. Outside linebacker, maybe an inside linebacker, but really, really fast. Another 10'8", 100 guy. Go check him out. And then another guy that's there from Texas. Look up Prince Will Umanelan out of Manor, Texas, which is around Austin. So go check out that list all on Husker Online. You can get to it through the recruiting tab. Go down to visits.
Absolutely. Always great stuff on the website. Always great stuff when you join us here on the Ticket Water Cooler. Thanks again for your time, Brian.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. There he goes. Brian Munson of Husker Online and On 3. All right, we'll take a quick break here on the Ticket Water Cooler. We're going to rock out as we get out of here. I put another song in here, so hopefully you guys like this out. I always like the bagpipes. So, all right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll see if Nick wants to jump in for the crossover as we get ready for Happy Hour. That's coming up next year on 93.7 The Ticket.